Hello again. We now turn to the topic of human resources. I've broken this topic up into 4 segments. I don't want to have you fall asleep in 1 or 2 long segments. And I think there's 4 nice topics that we can break this into. So we're going to start with hiring. Now, human resources, or HR, is not typically the organization that actually does hiring. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but normally they do the process of hiring. But it all starts, particularly in large businesses, with planning. How many jobs do we expect to have? How many new jobs, hiring are we going to do? How many people do we think are going to leave, either retire or quit? It's very different if you're in the restaurant business where turnover is very high and maybe less so in something like construction. Each business has its own unique profile, and HR will do some planning so they have an idea of the types and number of jobs that need to be brought in. Now, for each job that they need to bring in or that the company needs to have, there will be a job description that needs to be created. The job description is going to say, well, the title of the job, where the job is located, the hours of the job, the organization of the job. It might say what the salary options are or wages. It will typically tell you what the job does. This person does mechanical engineering design for new shower heads, for example. It will say that the job requires a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and maybe 2 years experience. It will probably also do something like saying desired is a master's in mechanical engineering and 4 years experience. But all those go into the job description and the specification of what the work is going to be. Now, as I said, HR defines the hiring process. They don't typically do the actual interviews and things like that. The reason for that is if I'm hiring a mechanical engineer to build a shower head that produces scented water, which is actually what my nephew's doing for Kohler, they're not going to know about the mechanical engineering. They're not going to be able to evaluate whether this person's a good mechanical engineer or a chemical engineer for a new pharmaceutical drug to treat coronavirus or something. They're not going to know anything about that. So they're going to rely on the hiring organization to do that, and they will define the process, what they need to do. And they define the process so that the organization doesn't run into problems, for example, with legal issues. Where HR might do hiring is if you're in an organization where everybody does the same thing. If I have 100 people working at a call center and everybody's making calls every day and they all do the same thing, well, HR can probably do the hiring for that. Now, hiring process starts with, as we said, a job description. HR will then advertise. Typically, they advertise the job internally first. In large organizations. That gives people who've worked there a long time an opportunity to advance themselves, to get into different kinds of work, and you reward people for being in the business. They will review applications that people send in. They will make sure that the application meets the minimum job requirements that are listed up here. But the interviewing will be done by the hiring organization. The hiring organization will determine who they want. And then HR, once the candidate is picked, HR will prepare the offer to the individual. Recruiting, as I said, it starts out internally, give people who are at the business an opportunity, then goes external. Company websites, a lot of stuff is done online. Company websites, employment websites like monster.com, social media. You can find people advertising in Twitter and Facebook. Campus recruiting is big, particularly at 4-year schools. Companies will come on and interview people, and based upon the interview, they might invite you to a visit, those sorts of things. Internships. Internships, one way to think about an internship is it's really a very long job interview. The company is going to be evaluating you to see whether you are a good fit and you'd like to have you. It's also an opportunity for you to take a look at whether you like the company or not. And maybe you don't like exactly what you're doing, but you see something else that's good. There'll be ads. Job fairs is an interesting thing. People will have job fairs. They might get together with other companies, say in a ballroom of a hotel where a lot of people will be out hiring, or they'll just have open job fairs at the company site. All right, so we start with an application. HR may do tests, drug tests, aptitude tests. My son, when he went to work for Maersk tankers, he had to take an IQ test. So there's all kinds of tests. Or if you're going to be a welder, you might be given a welding exam, things like that. They define, I talked about the hiring organization does the interviewing, but they will define the interview process, what gets done. Here at Raritan Valley, the HR department has defined the process to a very strong degree, where they even say, here's the question in advance. When you're going to hire a faculty member, you have to write down all the questions that you're going to ask every candidate, and you can only ask those questions that are on that sheet. They may have a physical exam if you're doing something like going to be a firefighter or a police officer. And reference checks. HR might do those. I think it'd be good for the hiring organization. If you're ever going to hire somebody, actually check the references. It's amazing what you might find out. Even though they're listed as a reference, not always the most positive thing. So check references. Now, the workforce is changing. Now, one of the things that's really good about the fact that it's changing is that it really has business benefits. When I was at Lucent in optical networking, it was nice when we get to certain holidays, some people would be off, but a large part of the organization would still be working. So we were able to work nonstop through things like Easter and Christmas and Passover. There would always be somebody that would be around to work. And it really helped. It really improved our efficiency. HR, as I said, is going to help keep you out of trouble with the law. Here's some simple laws that everybody should know. Clearly, the Civil Rights Act says you can't discriminate based upon race, color, religion, etc. In addition, what was added was the Age Discrimination Act. This protects people over 40. This is so that if they are going to receive retirement benefits, the company doesn't fire them before they are able to achieve those benefits. Equal pay for equal work. The Americans with Disability Act. This says that you have to give people with a disability the opportunity and reasonable accommodations to do a job. That doesn't mean you have to do unreasonable things, but you have to do things like a ramp for disabled people to be able to get in, have facilities, and restrooms and things to deal with this. We take this for granted, but there was a time when this was really a big issue and problems for people. Now, you don't have to give unreasonable accommodations. If someone is blind, there's not any accommodation you can make that will make them an art critic, or if someone is deaf, to let them be a music critic. But if you're blind, they could be a music critic. And if you're deaf, you could be an art critic. So you need to be able to make reasonable accommodations for someone. Good concept to know is contingent workers. Contingent workers are workers that are not full-time employees. And why they're important is that businesses often have cycles. We don't talk about the business cycle, but seasonality cycles or business cycles. And when times get bad, the contingent workers are the ones that can be let go. Maybe you have a lot of work coming in. We talked about seasonal unemployment earlier, right? Or seasonal employment. You're hiring a lot of people to do tax returns in April or January through April. Well, you bring them in, but you're not going to need them the rest of the year. So those would be contingent workers. They might be temporary, part-time. Contractors you might bring in, for example, to when you need a particular skill. I need a skill to somebody to develop a website for me. Need some programming skills, database programming skills, or analysis, those sorts of things. Now, the government has cracked down on something. Sometimes businesses used to hire contractors and keep them a very long period because they didn't want to have to pay them benefits or other reasons, because they could let them go if they needed to. But the government has said if you keep a contractor around for more than a year, the government considers them a full-time employee. All right, enough droning on this one. I'll pick up on the next one with more HR activities.